everybody, it's Mrs. F Science. So this is our first video that we're doing where we're practically going through how to do an exam question. So obviously I'm a qualified secondary science teacher, so I know what questions students struggle with most because I have marked those questions. And the thing that people struggle with most of your age, 15, 16, doing their GCSEs, are doing a 6-mark method question. So in today's short video, I'm going to show you step by step exactly how me as a teacher would answer a 6-mark method question. I'm going to apply that today to a biology 6-mark question, but that doesn't necessarily mean that this just fits biology. The method I'm about to tell you and my thinking would apply to every single 6-mark method question. Okay, this question was taken directly from a very recent AQA GCSE exam paper, so I'll just read it to you as follows. Cake and bread each contain the same 2 types of carbohydrate. Describe the chemical test that would be used to show the presence of the 2 types of carbohydrate in cake. Include a risk assessment in your answer. Okay. So what I've done here is exactly what I would encourage students to do in a real exam, but remember you need to use a black pen and not a highlighter in a real exam. So I've gone along here and underlined all the key words. So that includes that cake and bread contain the same 2 types of carbohydrate. You then need to describe, which means to give sort of a logical sequence of something, not to say why something happens. Describe the chemical test. That means you're going to have to describe a method of the test used to show the presence of the 2 types of carbohydrates. Okay. And it also mentions you've got to include a risk assessment. So after we've highlighted all the keywords, as you've already done, that then leaves me with, okay, these are the immediate thoughts that I would be hoping that you are having. Okay, so number 1, I hope you've realised by now that this is a question asking about food tests. Number 2, what are the 2 types of carbohydrates? So you'd be thinking, okay, that's clearly going to include starch and reducing sugars. Number 3, what type of reagents will I have to use? So in order to test for starch and to test for sugar, you should know that you're going to need to include iodine for starch and you're going to need to include Benedict's reagent and heat for reducing sugars. And then finally, I'd be thinking, okay, so what are the positive and negative results of that, which I'll show you on this page just now. Okay, so to test for starch, you're going to put iodine into your starch solution and it will turn blue-black in the presence of starch, and the iodine will stay orange if there is no starch. In terms of Benedict's reagent, testing for reducing sugars, if there are reducing sugars, you're looking for that brick red colour for the most sugar, or you're looking for the orange, the yellow, the green for a little bit less sugar. And if there is no sugar, it will stay blue. Okay, so you're about to start writing your answer, you're in the exam. These are the points that I want you to make sure you do for every single 6-mark answer you ever do. You have to make sure that you address every single point in the question. So in this one, for example, it's saying that you need to address both cake and bread and 2 types of carbohydrates. So straight away, if you are telling me only one of those, only about cake or bread, it's not going to get you the marks. If, for example, it's asking for a question about density and you only say about irregular types when it's asking for regular and irregular shapes for density, of course, you can only limit yourself to no more than half the marks, okay? Point number 1. So when it comes to this specific sort of answer then, where you're having to give a method about food tests, you're going to get marks for roughly the following. Roughly 2 for saying about the starch food test with the reagent and the positive and negative test. You're going to get another 2 marks for saying about the test for reducing sugars with the reagent used and the positive and negative results. And your final marks to round up your answer is you cannot ignore this sentence, include a risk assessment in your answer. And I'm going to show you, when I show you the mark scheme in a moment, what things would be acceptable for the include a risk assessment part of this question. So I would recommend you pause now, get yourself some paper or your phone note page, use bullet points and see if you could give a 6-mark answer to this question. Go. So before I show you the mark scheme, there's a little secret thing that I wanted to tell you that teachers don't always tell you. We don't just mark your 6-mark answers, literally ticking 6 points and doing 1 to 6. We mark it according to these levels. Okay, this applies to every single 6 mark question, and we first look at level one, which is usually 1 to 2 marks. Level one says the method would not lead to a valid outcome. Some relevant steps are identified, but links are not made clear. So basically, you might have put one or two things that are kind of okay, but it's not really the greatest of answers. Okay, level two, this is where most students sit. Level two says the method will not necessarily lead to a valid outcome, but most steps are identified. The method is not logically fully sequenced. So you've said some points, you do know what you're talking about, but you haven't done it into that perfect step-by-step method that's going to get you those top marks. And level three, which I know you're wanting to achieve, you want to be the best of the best. Level three is the top marks, 5 to 6 marks. The method would lead to the production of a valid outcome. The key steps are identified and logically sequenced. So basically, you've got a perfect method that perfectly describes everything I mentioned before about what I would be including in your answer, and I can't really fault it. There's nothing that is incorrect in that method. Okay, here's the rest of the mark scheme for you to mark your own answers now that you've looked at how the level marking works. Please now mark it and see what level you would give yourself and why, and how many of those points in that relevant content part did you hit. So, with any 6 mark method answer from any subject topic, one really good thing to do is then give yourself a worked example. You can just Google it or you can go on ChatGPT like I have for this one and basically then test yourself on what you would mark it. So, for example, give this one a pause, read it, have a think of how many marks you would give this, and I'll tell you in just a second. So yes, absolutely, this one is worth 6. It is worth the full marks. It hits every category. So as I said before, it's got each of the types of carbohydrate mentioned. It's got the reagent that will be used to test for it. It gives you the positive and negative test results for each of them. And then it also addresses that risk assessment there at the bottom. I've got nothing to fault with this one. This is full marks. And finally, just to finish, what about answer two? Have a little look at this one, see how many marks you'd give it, and I'll tell you in just a second. Okay, so this one would be just into level two. This would be worth 3 marks. The reason that this would get three is because you've mentioned Benedict's solution, which is great, and you've mentioned that it would go from blue to brick red, also great. Okay, you've mentioned then also iodine and the blue black, but you've told me absolutely nothing for iodine at all about a method, really. It's very vague. Um, you've mentioned a little bit about a risk assessment here. Um, but yeah, the answer just isn't detailed enough. It doesn't have that structured step-by-step method that the first question had. It only tells you like basic facts, not written in a very coherent way. I've made it to the end. Thank you so much, everyone, for revising with me today. If you found this really helpful, I'd love to know in the comments below. I'd also really love to know in the comments below if there's certain 6 mark questions or questions on exam papers for biology, for physics, for chemistry, anything at all that you'd like me to cover that you think would be helpful, please just comment and I'm more than happy to look into it. If loads of people are asking for the same thing, I'm happy to address that for you. I'd love to focus this on what will be the most useful to you. So thank you very much for joining me today. Look at the links below for some of the links to some of the resources I make on different websites to help you with your revision. And until next time then, see you soon. Bye.